Thank you. I'm Hedy Tripp, and you can hear me loud and clear. All right, and thank you, Tracy, for inviting me to honor Charles William Preble for the kind and gentle poet he was. I was deeply moved when I read Charles's poem, Chimeo, the Feast of Michael, Archangel, and I want to add a little bit more to that. A friend of mine, Vas Vitanio-Witch, pointed out to me that the very first line that Charles used, actually a Pueblo symbol, the crow. Either consciously or unconsciously, Charles centered that poem in the culture of the indigenous people. I don't use the word native, but the indigenous people of that place, the Pueblo and the Tewa people. According to Vas, the little crow, Vitanowicz, in these cultures, the crow is seen as a harbinger of omens and a messenger. Charles may also have addressed the appropriation of indigenous culture by Christianity in his use of the image of humanoid birds of feathered wings, the Archangel Michael, who is also an angel of mercy and a messenger. And Charles clearly states Chimayo as a Spanish village, not a Mexican village. So keep that in mind. And just as the earth beneath your feet was stolen from the indigenous people of this place and then called St. Joseph's, so was that original land that is now the town of Chimayo, appropriated by the Catholic Church. The earth in that place, and I think Larry mentioned that dirt, it still retains its healing power, despite the onslaught of cultural hegemony and settler colonialization. Charles's reference, if you remember, the cattle trail and the gruff of motorcycles. And Charles seriously contemplates the original healing beauty of that place and rebelliously floats on a day enchanted for poetry, just like today, touching our hearts and opening our minds. So I chose a poem of what Vas called avian imagery in Charles's poem, The Ruffed Grouse. And let me read that to you. The Ruffed Grouse by Charles. As I walked the grass path to the darkened pump house, where the surrounding pines were full of speckled light, I saw the ghost-like forms, the cryptic grays and browns mottled with dark and light spots, moving in a silent bavane of chicks and hens. As I stepped forward, the ruffed grouse stood on the path, holding his ground, his eyes on me. And I knew he meant close enough. As his covey continued their spectral trek, and when the last faded into the underbrush, he turned and without rush disappeared in plain view. There for some time I stood, wondering why I was allowed to see them, why there was no explosion of feathers, no frantic run in flight. Then I heard his territorial drum, the crescendo pounding of his wings. Now, where the grass path leads, I still see ghostly forms. And I know when I hear that drum, into whose land I come. I found that poem opened so many portals in my life experiences, and I wish I could have shared it with Charles. I wish I could have told him, too, that I may have seen his ruffed grouse. My son, and Jim here, teacher of my son, thank you for being here, used to attend St. John's Prep, and sometimes I drove him there, and I would take the opportunity to walk around the area. And this poem brought me back to that time, almost 20 years ago, to the hills and woods surrounding the school. But it is what Charles Preble said of the ruffed grouse's territorial drum, the crescendo of pounding, that brought me to another place when I first attended a powwow gathering in St. Cloud and heard those drums pounding and seeing the powwow dancers draw from nature, using the feathers of birds, skins of animals, and their movements in these gatherings. I am not indigenous to this country, but I deeply respect the social culture of the First Nation powwows. Then Charles' poem took me even further back to when I lived in Sumatra, Indonesia, also part of Southeast Asia. I was with a cultural anthropologist studying the Batak people, a people who had preserved their culture for many generations. I will bring a bit of that into this space. And finally, the drumming in Charles's poem brought me back in time, to the time of slavery in America and the drumming of feet escaping to freedom. In the end, I am jolted back to reality of today's America and anti-Black hatred, and inspired by Marilyn Nelson's poem, Through the Wormhole, I hear in my mind's eye the pounding feet of Black men like Ahmaud Arbery trying to run for their life. So here is my poem. You ready? All right. As I climbed the hill, a fan of feathers at the summit topped, flashed for just a moment, then stopped. Then the drumming reverberated down to my tingling feet. I blinked, and they were gone. Could they have been turkeys? It was close to Thanksgiving. Or were they, that I now know, Preble's ruffed grouse? Grouse's feathers transform a living First Nation man, brown-skinned, oiled in sweat, bustles quivering, arms flapping, feet dancing in traditional ancient steps, pounding around powwow drums. Now I am transported back to Batak ritual dances in sacred Sumatran Indonesian mountain villages, perched high above volcanic lakes, with gondong drums and serenade the shaman calls, ancestral spirits channeling their wisdom to those below, to crescendoed heartbeats, frenzied arms and feet, pounding the wooden flow, pulsing house pillars to the core, the drumming bodies drummed through generations, becoming one with the people through and through, even before colonial times, challenging Christianity's taboos. And on America's southern plantation lands, drumming feet pounded to another beat through thickets underground. Frantic runs in flight, cruel thorns flail face and hand to reach freedom land, where the drumming would stop, even for a short while, a brief stillness to salve ragged souls for hearts so full of holes. But then the drumming feet would again begin, for hateful, oppressive, racist laws still have the power to silence these feet forever. Thank you.